Okay, for our final week of class, we're going to look at a specific story paradigm. We're going to look at the hero's journey, which is often referred to as a monomyth. And we're going to be going through a couple of ideas about it. How do you go about looking at the hero's journey? How does it come into play? How do we parse it out? If you are in a creative writing class, you can use the monomyth to kind of start as a story. That, okay, let me have a basic idea, let me build on it by using this particular paradigm. So it is a way to help authors create stories because it gives us a narrative that we can start figuring out what our storyline is going to be. It also gives us a checklist to make sure that we got through the plot points that we would need. But how did we get here? How do we even sit and say today that we have this blueprint called the monomyth or the hero's journey? And that goes back to Joseph Campbell. In the early 1900s, he studied myths. He looked through a lot of historical myths, not just in Western society. He looked at Eastern society. He looked at African society, Arabic society. He looked throughout the world, and he said there's certain things that we all kind of have as general themes. And if we start looking at some of the world's masterpieces, we can start seeing that there's a thread that is going through there, and we all kind of share this common thread. And we're going to look at a couple of different people and how they've developed the hero's journey idea. There's lots of different ways to go about looking at paradigms. The one we're going to be looking at specifically is hero's journey. There's what's called post-Aristotelian, there's dramatica, there's lots of different ways in a creative writing class. But we want to kind of look at how do we develop plot, how do we develop characters, and we focus on our setting. And so the hero's journey, we don't have to worry that much about plot because that's going to come forth through the characterizations. We have stereotypical characters or archetypes, which we've already talked about in this course, and so they've already fit into the blueprint, so we can focus on the setting and we can figure out where is it that we want our new world to take place, where do we want our hero to be, where do we want everything to come together. Do we create a new world? Does it take place on Earth? Is it future? Is it past? So we don't have to worry so much about our characters because we're going to use archetypes. We don't have to worry much about our plot because we have this idea with the monomyth, how it's going to unfold. So this really allows us to be creative with our setting. And so that's what we're going to look at. So Joseph Campbell, he started looking at comparative mythology. And he again started looking at ancient myths. And he started to compare different scenes in the myths. And he started to say that a lot of these scenes were very similar. They had a lot in common. Started looking at Odysseus, Prometheus, Buddha, Penelope, Jesus, Osiris. A lot of these had a similar pattern if you looked at it. And so we could take a framework and we could see how the pattern emerged. And then we can extrapolate from there. And he did this in a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. So he said that there's this basic plot line that we can pull out the different steps, and then we can plug in different archetypes. We can plug in a hero, we can plug in an anti-hero, we can plug in the tragic hero, we can plug in the trickster, we can plug in the villain, etc. And then they can go through these steps of what makes the journey. And he says in The Hero with a Thousand Faces that the hero ventures forth from the world of the common day into a region of supernatural wonder. And so he starts following all these aspects. He starts saying, what are the things that the hero must do in order for us to get to the resolution? And then he started looking at, again, not just Western civilization. He started looking at the Middle East. He started looking at China. He started looking at Japan. He looked all over and he said there's some different ideas that we can pull together. And again, this is things that we've already talked about in the course, that we are usually going to have some kind of universal themes that will naturally lead one to the other, and we're going to make use of archetypes. And that's important because, again, as soon as we know that we have a villain here, we know what that character is, how it's going to react, we don't have to flesh it out any further. We have the damsel in distress, we know how she's going to act, and we don't have to really flesh it out any further because we have these great big stereotypical characters that we are using. And in his massive work, because again, he's an academic who spent his life studying myths. So he came up with 17 different stages. And I'm going to walk you through them, but we are going to shorten them down. We're not going to have nearly as many stages that we're going to work through and that you'll be working through for your final exam.